I'm Myron Walden. I'm from Miami, Florida, and right now I'm residing in New York City.
Why did you choose the saxophone?
Wow. Well, when I was younger, my uncle was listening to a recording, and it was a recording of Charlie Parker, and he was so moved by Charlie Parker that he was having a conversation while Charlie Parker was taking a solo. Charlie Parker would play a phrase, and my uncle would say, "Yeah, I hear you, Bird." Charlie would play something else. "Ooh, go ahead, Bird." And I was like, wow, really? It's like, you know what? I think I want to do that. Because I enjoyed listening to it myself just because it seemed interesting. And the people that know me know that I like to think. So when I heard him, it was like, well, why would he play that? What was he thinking? What was the night like when he showed up to the gig? Did he know he was going to be recording? So, yeah.
The Fellowship Band. You've been with that from the beginning. When was the beginning of that? When did it start for you?
Well, in 1997, I believe that's when it officially started. At least that's when we were preparing to do our first recording. But there was rumor that we actually had a gig in 96, but I don't recall it being 96. Maybe it was early 97. But sometime in mid 97, we were kind of rehearsing to record, and we did our first record in California. So that was a very memorable experience because that was the first time that I did a record where the band flew to another location to record. You know, usually everyone's coming to New York City to make a recording, so that kind of stuck in my mind like, wow, incredible.
And why you guys? Why the five of you were?
Well,
other guys?
I couldn't tell you why Brian made the choices he made as far as personnel, but after being in the band for so long and also playing in other bands, I get a sense that our sensibilities are very compatible. I think we're all pretty considerate and loving and, you know, all that mushy stuff, but it's not just in theory, it's like for real. And we get along, and we all met each other in different circles. Mm-hmm. Like I met Melvin before we joined Fellowship. There was a pianist that happened to like both of us, and she had us and her do her senior recital or something like that. And that was when I first met him, and I was like, wow, you sound like Stanley Turrentine. You sound like Stanley Turrentine. I mean, I was just so taken that someone, when I first heard Stanley Turrentine, I was like, oh my God. Oh, it was so soulful and then so intellectual, and it just had all the qualities that I thought to be great. Obviously, you don't need me to say that Stanley Turrentine was great, but he was the first that I actually heard before me that had a liking towards Stanley Turrentine. And he was a beautiful person, or he is a beautiful person. And then I went to school with John Coward at Manhattan School of Music. That was after he went to Loyola with Brian. And Chris Thomas, I think I met just in passing through maybe when he was playing with Betty Carter or something like that. And Brian, I met when I was at Manhattan School. He had come to do a recital, and Kevin Hayes was playing out with him. I don't know whose recital it was because I wasn't invited, but I just remember them coming into the building. I was like, hey, let me help you with that. And we talked for a moment. And then, sometime later, he got in contact with me and he said, man, I was wondering if you would like to do some playing. For those that know Brian, he's very, very gracious and humble. I mean, if you just kind of pass him on the street and happen to have a conversation, you wouldn't know that he was as formidable on the drums as he is. Not even just the drums, just as a person, his person comes through in his music, the first time I heard him sing and play guitar, I was shocked at first, but then it began to make sense to me because you listen to his lyrics and they're very thoughtful. They're very true. And the way he plays guitar kind of is a very calming, sensation that kind of emanates. Anyway.
You write a lot of songs. You're a big writer, right? I mean, you've always written a lot of songs.
No more than you.
Well, I mean, So that's a question I get a lot. Like, tell me about what, I have my own things. I want to hear about what is it that makes you, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you write to teach yourself something or to learn something, or do you write, you hear something and then you got to go and figure out what's going on. You got to get it out of your head. So
at one time I wrote, composition was kind of like I was working on something. It was like a learning process. Like I want to learn how to play over dominants that move in whole steps or half steps, et cetera, et cetera. And that was like early, well, not actually early. After my first 2 recordings, I began to get more methodical. And that's when I started writing, tunes. It's like I'm working on this and working on that. I guess Like a Flower was an example of like I was working on tritonics. And that's on the Like a Flower, Seeking the Sun recording. But it didn't happen really until after that recording. And that recording was released in 1999. So after that, I made 2 records for Fresh Sound. And that was like the period where I was like kind of working on this, working on that. And then I kind of grew out of that, and I got to the point where it was a reflection of what was happening in my life. Like when I met my wife, it's like something happened to me and I began to look at music in a different way because I was like, well, why is it that I have such beauty in my life, and then the music that I play and project, I feel as though it didn't have those qualities that I was feeling on the inside. And so I began to kind of put together the pieces to the recordings in this world to feel and what we share. And so that process was kind of based on kind of just letting myself feel and kind of, I think about, being in a place where sound represents emotion, and colors are also very prevalent to this because I think rich colors. And the first composition on To Feel is a great example of what I mean when I think rich colors, when the guitar takes the lead and the road kind of plays these moving chords. It really exemplifies to me what I was feeling at that moment. So earlier I wasn't ready to consider that or even kind of have the headspace to deal with that. But obviously as one matures, one's art kind of begins to take a reflection of your life and where you are emotionally, physically. I mean, you begin to feel more.
There's also something to be said for you just getting older and not feeling so much like maybe you have to show everybody what you can do in a certain way, right?
Yeah, well, I think early on that I was trying to move away from that, and I found myself shying away from certain environments because I felt it didn't allow me to not have to do something. Mm-hmm. Like I felt compelled to do this or to do that when it wasn't an internal thing. It was like, I remember once I was playing with someone and I had been thinking about this and I was like, I'm really tired of like really playing loud all the time, and not to say that I don't do it now, but I do it now because I feel compelled to do it from the inside and from the music that we're trying to project. But it's a different sensation that I think is emanating from the stage. Before, it was like I was trying to say, okay, I really don't want to do this. And I remember going to a rehearsal before the gig, and I said, okay, I'm going to not do this. I'm just going to play what it seems like it should be. And the leader stopped the band, and he's like, hey man,